Hello and welcome back. This is module 7. We are starting a new module. In this module, we will look at the applications of sociolinguistics, all the theories and all the different domains of language use, language variation and so on that we have studied till now. We will now see how those understandings, how those multiple variables actually play out in the real world. So, this module will explore how sociolinguistic principles apply to real world context. Now, this context might be many. So, each lecture we will try to focus on one or two domains in terms of application. So, we will talk about politics, media, forensics, education, sign language communities and so on. So, this is how the roadmap will be. We will start with lecture 1 today. Lecture 1 will look at language policies and language planning, how what are the different mechanisms, different kinds of variables that play out, and then language in the media, mass media, social media and so on. Like this, each lecture in this module will look at one or two applied domains. So, language policy and language planning will make up the first lecture, that is today's lecture. Now, language policy and language planning are two connected, but different applied domains. So, language policy on the one hand and language planning on the other. So, policy precedes planning in any kind of a given scenario. Now, what is language policy? Now, there are 180 countries in the world that has an official language policy, which means a large number of the world's countries have a language specific explicit language policy. Now, what does this basically do? Language policy decides, primarily it decides the nature of the language that will be used in that said country. Now, if it is a largely monolingual country, problems are less. If it is a largely multilingual country like India, then we have multiple things to do. So, at the policy level, the decision is about what will be the national language, what will be the official language, what will be the specific rights for different kinds of specific linguistic communities and so on and so forth. So, based on preferences, what kind of picture that the country wants to reflect, depending on that, countries can have monolingual or multilingual language policy. So, Canada for example has a multilingual language policy where more than one official languages are there. So, both French and English and as well as many other languages that are recognized as official languages. That is what we mean by multilingual language policy. On the other hand, we have France. France has for a long time been a multilingual country. So, similarly, many other Western European countries have their own language, Italian in Italy and so on and so forth. So, that is what we mean by language policy. What is the country's preference for a particular language or more than one language as their official language. Thus, language policy refers to the ideological as well as the regulatory framework governing language use in a society. It is not merely ideological because you need a framework. Ideology might be at the background, but ultimately we need regulatory framework that will typically be given out by the government of that country, and together they create language policy. In language policy, hence we have two layers, two kinds. One is called the explicit policy, the other is called the implicit policy. Now, explicit policy is the official standpoint, the constitutional provisions. Typically, in democratic countries, this is where it will come from. If it is a monarchy, then it is a easier job. So, either way, explicit policies will be the way the government of the country decides what the policies would be, and implicit policy on the other hand will be the social attitudes. Now, if the society has one kind of attitude, but the government takes a completely different standpoint, then we will have problems. That is something we will discuss towards a little later, but this is also possible. But largely depending on the social attitudes, government policies are created, depending on the sentiment of the larger amount of people, larger good and so on and so forth. Even on the basis of that, the explicit government policies are decided. Now, to understand language policies, we need to understand that in sociolinguistics, this is understood as a framework of ideas, laws and institutional decisions. There are multiple things that are part of this. So, the wheel has multiple spokes, so to say, which will decide which languages are promoted. So, if one language is promoted, if it is a multilingual society and one language gets promoted, naturally the other languages will be overnight. Let us say at today there are 5 languages which are spoken, tomorrow I decide one of them to be the national language or the official language of a particular state, then the others immediately has a minority status or let us say less prestigious status. So, all of these are important. So, which language will be promoted, and if it is promoted, then many other things will happen to it. So, it will be standardized, it will be protected, other languages will be marginalized. So, it will all depend on the given socio-cultural and political backdrop. This includes decision about, so this is something we have already talked about. So, official language for multiple purposes, like typically policy will have to do with mostly with the domains where which language will be used where. So, administration, judiciary, education, these are the domains where the official status of the language will have an impact, and simultaneously we will also talk about linguistic rights of speakers. So, even if it is not a language that is an official language, recognized official language, in that case what will be the rights of those language speakers. So, all of these are part of language policy. The policy and language planning are often discussed interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. This is just a kind of a disclaimer. They sometimes they are used interchangeably, but they are interconnected, but not the same thing. So, while policy provides the ideological and political direction, at the same time language planning refers to the practical steps. So, if I want to make language X as the official language, what will be the real practical steps that will need to be taken into account in order to give it that status, or let us say to make it eligible for that status, or at least to fit into that status. This is a layered process. Now, there are multiple theoretical positions on this. One of the most well known is that of Spolsky's 3 components. What are the 3 components of language policy? This is language practices, language belief or ideology, and the language management. So, actual patterns of language use refers to the practices, and then there is language belief, ideology, social belief, social understanding, and then of course, the management. So, explicit efforts. Now, language management is not restricted to only the official language or national language, but at the same time how other languages will be treated. So, all of that are part of language management, to the extent what kind of language is considered racist, what kind of language is considered not inappropriate for certain scenario, all of that are part of language management. So, this is the larger domain. So, together these explain why language policies succeed or fail in practice. Not always the policies get good results. In some countries, this has given rise to multiple political upheavals and many other things that have happened. So, depending on how carefully you are framing your policy based on these 3 factors, it will decide how it goes. Language planning, this is how we talk about it. So, deliberate and systematic, these 2 are important things. This is a conscious process, the effort that are taken by the policy makers as well as the specialists. So, they will make a deliberate effort to create certain, so undertaken by authoritative bodies, it can be government, educational institute, linguistic agencies, etc., to influence how languages are used, structured, learned within a particular society. So, many scholars have worked on this. So, Wardow for example explains that language planning involves evaluating linguistic resource, making policy decisions, and then assigning specific social functions. What does it mean, assigning function? Now, all languages are technically speaking are good enough for all kinds of functions, simply because a community speaks that language, it is good enough. But the catch comes when we are trying to assign a language as an official language, assign a status as an official language, which it was not used for before, a domain of usage that it did not have before. In that case, we are talking about assigning specific social functions. So, all of that, all of these roles that the language needs to play immediately will give rise to certain kinds of efforts, deliberate efforts to create the necessary tools. For example, if you are let us say language X was not an officially recognized language, now it is. So, as a result the government declared that this language will now be used for all official purposes. Now, official purposes for today's term, it needs a specific jargon. Remember we talked about style and register. So, register requires in any language to have a register, you require a certain specific vocabulary. Now, this language was not used for today's administration, maybe it was used for village administration, but not in the way things are done in the modern world, in the bigger at the state level, national level, international level and so on. So, now you need a new set of jargon, new set of vocabulary. So, that is part of the deliberate effort and creating those specific tools for its new assigned role. This is not a new thing, this has been going on for some time. So, 1957 Weinreich, we have talked about Weinreich before as well. So, he coins the term at Columbia University. This is a small timeline. 59 Huygens introduces the term language planning as an academic concept, and then 89 Cooper defines it as an intentional attempts to influence linguistic behavior. So, this is how it started and this is how it has been going for some time. So, why is it important? For multiple reasons, but most of the time this refers to the decision about national and official languages, because these decisions are not primarily linguistic. So, which language will be used for official purposes has nothing to do with its linguistic structure or linguistic position within the family tree, nothing. Most of the time this is a socio-political decisions. So, as a result of which multiple languages might have multiple impacts within the given political reality of a nation. So, often what happens is that languages are used as symbols of national identity. That is why one language is chosen which represents the culture, represents the national unity, and that is what is chosen, even if there are multiple possibilities that exist. So, this is one reason. So, language planning becomes necessary when governments attempt to manage linguistic diversity for administration, education and national unity. So, multiple reasons might be at the background for creating those. So, as a result of which this is also often more meaningful where situations demand one language to be chosen, if it is a multilingual community. So, one language has to be chosen basically for ease of business. The government needs to have one language or two languages, but it cannot have 100 languages to print all the documents in. So, this is for ease of administration that we need to take one language out of that, but as a result of which sometimes also creates multiple types of problems. And this problem sometimes it is purely because the society has been always multilingual, sometimes the colonial hangover will be there, sometimes because of all of these policies and plannings the indigenous languages can be marginalized. So, the moment we talk about language policy and language planning, multiple types of reasons as well as effects can be seen, and all of that are studied within the applied domain of sociolinguistics. Now, this is how Holmes puts it. There are three major motivations for language planning and language policies. So, the efficient communication, streamlining governance and administration. Most of the time it is because it is for administrative purposes. The society, this kind of recognition of one language over another does not really have anything to do with the mass level communication. This is more to do with the governments and their schemes and their administrative activities. Nation building, of course, that is one, and economic and educational access. So, ensuring equitable opportunities for all citizens. So, if you choose only one among the smaller languages, then it will be not possible for the others to access. So, that is how it goes. Often the language policies and language planning related activities deal with national and official language. So, there is a definitional discussion is in place. So, national language will be a language that serves as a symbol of a nation's identity. This is very crucial. That is why we need a national language. I mean, nations do need a national language. So, this language stands for this particular national identity. This is what typically it means. So, it represents the people and their heritage. So, each community has their own heritage, own history, culture, cultural artifact and so on and so forth. So, that language is an indicator of all that. Official language on the other hand does not have much to do with heritage factor or identity factor or any of these. This is purely for the purposes of government business, administration, law and education and so on and so forth. In societies which have less number of languages, this is a simple scenario where national and official language can be the same, for example, in Japan, but for many other languages, many other communities, many other countries, this is not so simple. A case in point is of course India. So, there is a bit of a dilemma for linguists, because language policy automatically sidelines some smaller languages while giving more importance to the majority languages. So, linguists try to preserve the linguistic diversity and promote equality. On the other hand, whichever government it is, it needs to prioritize the political unity and the administrative efficiency. So, as a result, often linguists who are also part of language planning and policy making activities need to have this, they need to keep this in mind. Now, there are multiple frameworks that have been proposed. For example, this is the step. So, selection, codification, elaboration and acceptance, this is how Huygens gave his framework in 1964. Selection is simple, choosing a particular variety to be developed for official purposes, and then once that happens, there is a standardizing process. Codification, as I said before, you need to create specific vocabulary, you need to create grammars, dictionaries and written system. Many languages which did not have a writing system before, no script of their own, sometimes you need to create a script. All of these are part of standardization process. And then elaboration, so extending vocabulary. So, codification and elaboration are part of the bigger process called planning. So, corpus planning and status planning is also how we know it. And then acceptance. Once this has happened, then encouraging population to use and accept the new variety through education and through media. These are the 4 steps that we got in 1964, and of course, later on it became simplified. Now, we talk about status planning and corpus planning. The same thing, status planning is deciding which language will be given the official status. So, that is status planning. That happens over a period of time. Multiple reasons are there, government has their own reason, socio-cultural factors are there. So, this is deciding one particular variety to be used for government, education, court, media and so on and so forth. That decision is part of the status planning. And then corpus planning is what we just talked about, creating the script, creating the vocabulary, expanding the vocabulary, grammar, taking care of grammar and multiple other things. There are many other theories that have also been proposed in this regard, but more or less they are based on the same thing. So, Rubin's 4-step process is fact finding, planning, then implementation and feedback. Similarly, Ruiz has given us language as a problem, then language as right and language as resource. So, language as problem as in viewing linguistic diversity as an obstacle to mainstream integration. When there are too many languages, the integration becomes national integration might become a problem. That is when you need to have one language to represent all the people. So, that is another kind of format that have been proposed in 1990. Not only these 2 major types of planning, we also have different others. So, acquisition planning, prestige planning, micro versus macro planning that have been proposed. So, Cooper proposed the acquisition planning. It concerns how people will learn the planned language. Language learning is also possible to plan. So, usually through education system, teacher training, language policy in schools, because once you it may sound easy, but it is not easy. Once you decide, you as in the government decides for one language to be given a particular status, then the entire network of systems, government systems have to be put into place. So, you decide the language, you create the structure and everything, but then how do you take it to the masses, how do you take it to the population? There also you need to plan. So, acquisition planning is also part of that. Prestige planning was proposed by Herman, for example, 1990, focuses on the psychological background and values that make people accept or reject language planning provisions. A lot of background work needs to be done. And then the macro and micro planning, basically the local level versus the government level. Similarly, comprehensive versus partial planning. Comprehensive planning refers to where the planning covers both status as well as corpus problems will be taken into. So, both status and corpus planning, or the words, the vocabulary and everything. But sometimes partial spatial planning is also possible, focusing on specific or just some of the linguistic factors, not the entirety of the language need to be planned, that is also possible. Similarly, global versus local, centralized, decentralized, imperative, indicative and so on and so forth. Language management can have other types as well, as I said in the very beginning. So, responsibility for managing bad language, this is something that we do at a micro level. At a family level, we often stop children from using bad words. At a government level, some words are considered taboo, some words are censored, you cannot use those words. For example, in the movies and other kinds of platforms, you will see there will be a beep will replace the bad word. So, this is also part of language management, what can be broadcast, what can be written and as well as what can be spoken. So, in the social media these days, there are certain words that cannot be used. So, people find interesting ways of camouflaging that bad word. So, this is part of language management. So, in the American Psychological Association guidelines for avoiding racist language, they have given a guideline with all these different points. So, blacks and whites are capitalized, Mexican American is not hyphenated, racial group names are capitalized and so on and so forth. So, governments may revisit the language policies from time to time depending on the socio-political cultural scenario in the country, and this keeps changing. So, every now and then you have a new set of words that can be used or not can be used. All of these will be part of language planning and language policy. Similarly, sexist language, so chairman being replaced by chairperson and so on and so forth. What is blasphemy? Sometimes irreverence towards God or any kind of sacred person or objects is called blasphemy. So, blasphemy laws, some countries do have blasphemy laws with respect to language use in certain domains, taboo. All of these are part of to the extent that some countries also has the provision of controlling personal names. So, the way the citizens can be named, so there is a registry, your name has to come from that registry. If you have a name that does not belong, that is not there in the registry, then it will not be allowed. So, governments may even control what kind of name somebody will have. Now, let us look at some examples. We will see some examples from other countries and then we will discuss a little bit more about India. Now, one of the most well known case of language policy with respect to how the national identity is projected is the case from Kemal Atatürk's policies. So, after the defeat of Ottoman Empire in the First World War, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk became the ruler of Turkey. Following that, he made multiple changes in the language. He made multiple efforts to make changes in the language in order to make the language fit the new identity that the country was adopting. After the World War, the country became a Republic of Turkey. Previously, it was not a democracy. So, it was an empire. Ottoman Empire was a vast empire actually. So, after the World War, they became a republic. So, after this has become republic, now they also had to do, they wanted to project themselves as a nation state, secular and progressive. In order to do that, he was of the opinion that one way of doing it is cleaning the language of the foreign influences. So, primarily he wanted to get rid of the Arabic and Persian words from the Turkish language. So, many policies, and the most important of them is called the language reform. So, alphabet reform was carried out. The Turkish Language Association was founded in 1932 and then very soon the first Turkish Language Congress was held. And this is how he put it. So, the Turkish nation, which knows how to protect the high independence of its country, must also free its language from the yoke of foreign languages. And this is the reason why they undertook a long process to simplify the language and to give it the prestige it needed. The words that they got rid of were Persian and Arabic origin, and then there were language commissions and so on and so forth. So, basically multiple changes were brought into the language in order to sanitize it from the previous identity. Previously it was the empire, Ottoman Empire. So, in order to make a shift from the empire to the republic, language also was sanitized accordingly. And there are multiple institutions were created, multiple congress happened, alphabet reform happened, and so on and so forth. Singapore is another interesting example. It is a city state, but it has multi-ethnic population. So, as a result of which the government has created what they call racial categories to accommodate the diversity. Singapore has multiple different types of racial categories. So, the main categories are Chinese, Malay and Indian. Indian, of course, they include India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, all of them are clubbed under Indian, and then they also have a others category. So, in Singapore, the government has created these racial categories, the Chinese, Malay, Indian and others, so 4 categories. Now, this is a small nation state, but then Singapore did not want to have an identity as a monolingual country, and they wanted to accommodate all the different varieties of languages that are there. So, as a result of which the country has a policy that goes like this. So, each of the ethnic groups from this CMIU is Chinese, Malay, Indian and others, has an officially assigned ethnic mother tongue. So, they have identified 4 ethnic groups, and each group has a language that identifies them. So, that is their kind of a representative language. Mandarin for the Chinese, Malay for the Malay and Tamil for Indians. The other group has no officially designated mother tongue. So, this is how the Singapore scenario works, and English is the common language. So, everybody is expected to learn and use English language. So, while English kind of binds them together, while English makes the official work, official purposes smooth, at the same time the ethnic communities also have been given equal right to use their mother tongue for all kinds of intra group activities. So, as a result of which this is a very interesting kind of bilingualism, where English and mother tongue bilingualism is prevalent. And this was, of course, this entire idea goes back to their plan. So, this is when the task ahead is a document that was adopted in 1959-64, where this entire plan was elaborated. Hong Kong is yet another interesting case study. So, in 1997 Hong Kong was reunited with China. So, as a result of which the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government issued guidelines related to medium of education in secondary school. Now, Chinese was to be used as the medium of instruction to students, because now it is reunited with China. But this resulted in a very interesting protest. The parents and the students, they were not interested in going back to Chinese, because English was the language that they had been using and they wanted to continue using English. The reason that was given was changing from English to Chinese will adversely affect their future prospects. So, these are various kinds of scenarios that we have seen in the world. Now, let us come to India. India, of course, has a rather elaborate procedure, elaborate system that is part of the constitution with respect to the rights and duties of the roles of the languages of the country. We will discuss this in 2 parts. So, one is the Official Language Act, and then we will look at the specific parts of the constitution which mentions the rights. So, Official Language Act, the entire process started in 1937. As you can see, there were all kinds of important things that happened, milestones. So, 1937 the early opposition Justice Party opposed the attempts to make Hindi compulsory in school. Then pre-65 there was a lot of fear that Hindi was getting imposed on non-Hindi speaking population, non-Hindi speaking states. Massive protests primarily in Tamil Nadu, and then Tamil Nadu took a stand to officially reject the 3-language formula, which they are doing still. And then parliament action, so joint session of parliament convened to address the crisis and prevent unrest. So, as a result of which this was created Official Language Act, and this was amended in 1967. This provided a legal framework for the continued use of English for official union purposes beyond the initial 15-year constitutional period. Initially, the idea was English will remain official language for 15 years, eventually making way for one of the Indian languages, mostly Hindi. So, this was what the protest was against. So, while establishing procedures for the use of Hindi and other regional languages. So, India, basically the idea here is that India actually had a proper Official Languages Act which was necessitated because of the multilingual nature of our country. So, the key provisions are here we have included. So, section 3, section 4 and section 5 and 6, all of these take care of the all of these issues. So, continued use of English, and then official language committee was created, and then the authorized translation. So, Hindi translations of central acts, ordinance and regulations published under presidential authority are deemed authoritative texts. So, all of these are part of the act that was there. Similarly, judicial and administrative provisions were also made. Multiple sections in that act point out the specific purposes and specific ways of carrying out those particular purposes. So, a presidential consent, governor may, with presidential consent, governor may authorize use of Hindi or state's official language for judgment, provided English translation accompanies them. So, basically English remains at the central as well as the state level as the official language. Hindi might be there, and the other states the state official language might be there, and this is for administration as well as judiciary that was there. In the constitutional framework, the provisions for Indian constitution talks about the official languages as well as the other kinds of names that it gives for other languages. So, we have 22 scheduled languages. Scheduled languages mean it is those languages are part of the 8th schedule. So, all the major languages are part of the 8th schedule. They are typically the state official languages. So, this is how the constitution takes care of it. So, the constitutional provision reflects India's commitment to linguistic diversity while maintaining administrative unity. So, administrative unity typically is done with English as well as Hindi, but the state official languages are also there. So, Constituent Assembly debate, they had the language question and there was a debate, and because of which the decisions that were taken. So, Hindi in Devanagari script was the official language, and 15-year transition period, that is what we talked about just before this while talking about the Official Language Act. So, 15-year transition period during which English would continue for all official purposes. So, basically sticking to English while making Hindi accepted. We talked about that the policies might be taken by the government, by the ministries and so on, but eventually the public has to accept, and that is where the whole thing is. So, union language, all of these different articles, article 343, 344, 345, 247, all of these articles specifically tell us about which language to be used as the union language, what to be used as the state language, and then the languages for courts, law and special directives, all of them have been very clearly mentioned in the constitution. Article 29 is specifically important because it gives protection to the minority languages. So, smaller languages also have rights. So, this protects cultural and educational rights of minorities, including religious, linguistic and cultural practices. So, in smaller languages they are allowed to practice, allowed as in this is not. So, there are two kinds of language policies also at another level. For one of them is called tolerance based. So, the language X is tolerated, but it is in Indian case it is not just tolerated, but also encouraged. All the local languages have also been always encouraged to be used for intra-group. There is no restriction on using that language to write books, to bring out newspapers or anything. So, basically everybody is free to use their language in whichever way they want, but official status is not given to all of them, because of course, India is a vast country and there are hundreds of languages. Language conservation is also another important factor that our constitution includes. Medium of education is where a lot of debates have taken place. The old National Policy of Education in 1968 spoke about the regional languages and the 3-language formula. So, the 3-language formula took care of the home language, that is the regional language, and then we have English and Hindi in non-Hindi speaking states, and any other modern Indian language in non-Hindi speaking, Hindi in non-Hindi speaking and other languages in Hindi speaking states. This also has a history starting with 1948-49, when this entire idea was conceptualized by the Radhakrishnan Commission, and then finally we had Kothari Commission in 64 to 66, which proposed the 3-language formula TLF as the solution for education purposes. And of course, of late 2020 we had NEP, the latest version of NEP, which offered even more flexibility. So, it retains the framework, but adds more flexibility. One of the most important thing about 2020 NEP 2020 is that it also allows the smaller languages to be used for medium of as medium of education, following which many states have already started implementing them. Assam, for example, has already identified Dimasa and Karbi as medium of instruction in the schools. So, this is the detail about the Kothari Commission, which was which gave the 3 language formula, the what language to be used. So, 10 plus 2 plus 3 structure also came from the Kothari Commission, and the 3 languages that and what will be their roles. And this is a current policy. Mother tongue emphasis is there. Along with that, government has also multiple other initiatives. One of them is Samagra Shiksha scheme, which was launched in 2018. It integrates Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan and teacher education, and then we also have PM Shri. So, basically multiple initiatives by the government. From time to time they have tried to address the multilingual, multicultural ethos of the country by giving specific roles to play, and also allowing them to increase their presence in multiple domains, education, be it education, media and many other factors. Not only that, there are also technology innovation efforts that are directed at all the languages. There are multiple schemes. Due to paucity of time, I cannot describe all of them or explain all of them. I have added them in the annexure. One can look up if you are interested. So, this is where we will complete lecture 1 of the module 7. Thank you.